The vast chamber of the Grand Council Room stretched impossibly high, its ceiling lost in darkness far above. Walls shimmered with diamond-like reflections, casting prismatic light across the gathered delegates. At the center, 20 golden thrones floated in perfect circular formation, each occupied by one of the founding species, those who had established the Galactic Federation over 3 millennia ago. Far below them, on a simple metal chair that seemed deliberately placed to emphasize its inferiority, sat Jake Morrison. His navy blue uniform, adorned with the Earth insignia, was immaculate. But his eyes betrayed exhaustion. 3 years of diplomatic negotiations had worn him down. 3 years of bringing reasonable proposals to this chamber, only to have them dismissed with barely concealed contempt. Captain Lisa Martinez stood at the observation deck above, watching her old friend and former crewmate with concern. She had served with Jake for 20 years, before his appointment as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. She recognized the set of his shoulders, the slight tension in his jaw. Jake was reaching his breaking point. The human proposal regarding trade routes through the Orion sector is, once again, denied, announced the Zephyrian delegate, his translucent tentacles waving dismissively. Your species lacks the necessary complex thinking to manage such vital pathways. Jake kept his face neutral, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrests of his chair. This was the 30th rejection in 3 years. Earth had joined the Federation with such hope, such excitement at finally being part of the galactic community. Now that excitement had curdled into bitter disappointment. The Council suggests, added the Andromedan representative, her crystalline form glittering under the chamber lights, that humans might serve better as a labor force under supervision. Perhaps in a few hundred years, your species might develop sufficiently to be granted greater responsibilities. Jake felt something snap inside him. The Federation had been happy to accept human medical breakthroughs, agricultural techniques, and manufacturing innovations. Several planets now depended heavily on Earth's resources and expertise. Yet at every council meeting, humanity was treated as little more than clever animals. He thought of the billions back home waiting for positive news, for recognition of their rightful place among the stars. He thought of the medical supplies Earth had freely given to Aquinas Prime during their epidemic, the crystalline processors they'd designed for Kepler 442b, the terraforming expertise they'd shared with countless colonies. And still, they were denied even basic protections for their ships and trade routes. A small flicker of hope had sustained him through these 3 years, the belief that patience and diplomacy would eventually earn humanity the respect it deserved. That hope had finally extinguished. Jake stood up. The motion was so unexpected that the hovering thrones momentarily stopped their gentle bobbing. The Zephyrian delegate paused mid-sentence, multiple eyes blinking in confusion. Earth formally withdraws from all negotiations with the Galactic Federation. The words hung in the air. The 15 other human delegates behind Jake also rose to their feet in perfect unison. They had discussed this possibility in private, though none had truly believed it would come to this. "What did you say?" The Keeper of Worlds leaned forward on his ornate throne, expression incredulous. "Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Federation. Effective immediately," Jake repeated, his voice stronger now. "We will be recalling all human personnel from Federation stations, planets, and vessels. All technology-sharing agreements are hereby terminated." "You cannot," began the war singer, her melodious voice rising in alarm. "We can, and we are," Jake interrupted. "For 3 years, we have attempted to negotiate in good faith. For 3 years, we have been dismissed, belittled, and exploited. No more." The chamber erupted into chaos. The delegates on their floating thrones shouted over one another, some demanding Jake be removed, others calling for immediate concessions to prevent Earth's departure. But Jake and his delegation were already walking toward the exit, backs straight, faces set with determination. Captain Martinez fell into step beside them as they left the chamber, a small smile of pride on her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Jake nodded grimly. "Now we find out if we've just saved humanity or doomed it." Within 6 hours, the news had spread to every major space station and planet in the Federation. Humanity was pulling out, taking with it the medical supplies, materials, and technologies that many worlds had come to rely upon. On Aquanus Prime, the ocean world where billions of aquatic aquans lived in vast, underwater cities, panic spread quickly. Their population had become dependent on human-engineered vaccines to combat a persistent aquatic virus. Aquan merchants frantically tried to establish direct communication with Earth, offering any price for continued medical supplies. On Kepler 442b, home to the crystalline beings known as crystallins, the crystal processing plants began shutting down as human engineers and workers departed. Without the specialized knowledge to maintain the delicate systems, production of vital crystal components, used in everything from communications to energy generation, ground to a halt. At Luna Station, orbiting Earth's moon, Dr. Emma Collins and Dr. Ryan Walsh monitored the incoming data streams with growing amazement. Across dozens of worlds, production charts plummeted as human expertise and labor vanished. "I never realized how deeply integrated we'd become," Dr. Collins murmured, watching as another economic indicator turned red on her holographic display. "The Federation made us believe we were the junior partners, barely contributing." "They believed it too," Dr. Walsh replied, enlarging a sector map showing the movement of ships throughout Federation space. Human vessels were converging on Earth in a massive migration home. "That's the problem with arrogance. You stop seeing reality." On Kepler 442b, Steve Parker, the mine supervisor, faced an angry gathering of the Crystalline High Council. Their faceted bodies reflected the harsh artificial light as they demanded explanations. "My workers are leaving because your representatives at the Federation have consistently denied them basic rights," Parker explained, trying to keep his tone respectful despite his frustration. "I've trained your people as best I could, but the integration of quantum fields into crystal matrices requires human intuition that can't be taught in a few days." The crystalline queen, her body composed of rare purple crystals, vibrated in distress. "We will offer better compensation, better living conditions." "It's too late," Parker interrupted. "The decision wasn't mine. It came from Earth itself. On Mechanicus, the industrial planet where automated factories and robot workers produced much of the Federation's heavy machinery. Zara Thompson was packing her equipment. As chief engineer, she had designed most of the complex systems that kept the planet's production lines running. Without her and her team, the self-replicating robots would eventually make critical errors in reproduction. Already, 3 production lines had shut down due to cascading failures. On Harvest Moon 7, Tony Garcia watched with a heavy heart as the fields he had cultivated began to wither. The agricultural techniques that had transformed this barren moon into a breadbasket required constant human attention. The photosynthetic council members, plant-based life forms who depended on the food grown here, were already showing signs of distress, their leaves curling and changing color. "We can pay more," one council member begged, root-like appendages trembling. "We can give you anything you want." "It's not about payment," Garcia explained gently. "It's about respect, and that decision isn't mine to make anymore." On Earth, President Diana Foster addressed an emergency session of the United Nations. The holographic projections of world leaders filled the General Assembly Hall, their faces showing a mix of determination and apprehension. "The Galactic Federation fleet is approaching Earth orbit," President Foster announced. "They are demanding we restore all agreements and return to the negotiating table." Admiral Kevin Brooks, commander of Earth's Space Defense Force, stood at attention beside her. We have informed them that Earth is no longer a Federation member, and that their vessels are not welcome in our space. They continue to approach. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Humanity had advanced significantly since first contact, but their military technology still lagged behind some of the older Federation species. "Are we prepared for conflict?" asked the representative from the African Union, her voice steady despite the gravity of the question. "We are prepared to defend ourselves," Admiral Brooks replied. "But our intelligence suggests the Federation is in too much disarray to mount a coherent military response. Their economy is already showing signs of severe strain without human participation." President Foster nodded. "Our withdrawal was not an impulsive action. For 3 years, we documented our contributions to the Federation economy, science, and culture. We knew exactly what would happen when we left." "And if they attack anyway?" The European Union representative leaned forward. "Then we will demonstrate that humanity should never have been underestimated," Admiral Brooks answered, his expression grim. In an emergency session of the Federation High Council, 12 species sat in tense silence as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The elegant chamber, usually a place of measured debate and ritual, had descended into something approaching panic. Mayor Zephyrian, whose tentacles now hung limp with stress, stared in horror at the economic projections. If the humans don't return, the entire economic system could collapse within months. "We should force them back," growled the Warsaw representative, his armor clanking as he shifted on his throne. "Our military might is superior. They would have no choice but to comply." "Is it?" The Keeper of Worlds raised an eyebrow. "Have you checked your fleet status recently? How many of your vessels are currently inoperable due to the departure of human maintenance crews? How many of your weapon systems were manufactured with components from Kepler 442b, components no longer being produced?" The Warser fell silent, mandibles clicking in frustration. "We must face reality," continued the Keeper. "We have become more dependent on humans than they are on us. Their medical knowledge, agricultural techniques, engineering skills, we've integrated them all into our societies without acknowledging their value." On the main display, economic indicators continued to flash red. The Andromedan banking system was showing signs of credit collapse. The crystalline manufacturing network had already declined by 17% in just 3 weeks. "Can we not replicate their technologies?" asked the synthetic delegate, its metallic face impassive. "Not quickly enough," replied the Keeper. "We dismissed their methods as primitive, never bothering to truly understand them. Now we lack both the knowledge and the time to reverse engineer everything they provided." Deputy Prime Minister Zephyrian rose from his seat, wings fluttering in agitation. "My world faces famine without the agricultural shipments from Harvest Moon 7. We must offer concessions, anything to bring the humans back to the table." "Concessions?" The Warser slammed a clawed fist down. "We do not bow to lesser species." "Lesser?" The crystalline representative's voice chimed like breaking glass. "Was it not your dismissive attitude that caused this crisis? You and Zephyrian both treated humans like dirt beneath your feet." "And you were quick enough to profit from their labor," shot back Zephyrian. The Keeper of Worlds raised a hand, calling for silence. "If we descend into blame and recrimination, the Federation itself will fracture. We must find a solution." "Military intervention," began the Warser. "Would be disastrous," interrupted the Keeper. "Even if we could assemble a functional fleet, which is doubtful given our current state, any attack on Earth would solidify human resistance and potentially drive other species to their side." "What other species?" scoffed the Warsinger. "Who would ally themselves with these upstarts?" The Keeper's expression grew grave. "Have you not noticed? The gentlefolk have already established direct communication with Earth. The quiet ones have withdrawn their observers from our stations. The tidal folk are redirecting their trade ships to human colonies." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. "The species we have long ignored or marginalized see in humanity A potential ally, the keeper continued. One that might treat them with more respect than we have shown. Then, what do you suggest? Asked the Aquan representative. Water continuously flowing over his gills, as stress increased his oxygen requirements. We must offer genuine partnership, said the keeper. Not the facade we have maintained until now. Equal representation, equal rights, equal voice in all Federation matters. Impossible! The Warser rose to his full, intimidating height. The founding species have ruled for 3 millennia. We will not surrender our authority to newcomers and lesser beings. Then, said the keeper quietly, the Federation as we know it is already dead. As the Federation Council descended into deadlock, unable to reach any consensus on how to respond to the human withdrawal, individual worlds began seeking their own solutions. Zephyrian secretly opened negotiations with Outer Rim colonies, hoping to recruit replacement engineers and scientists. The effort yielded meager results. Most capable species were already integrated into the Federation economy, and those who weren't lacked the specific expertise needed. The Crystalline High Council approved unprecedented wage increases and living standard improvements, hoping to lure human workers back to Kepler 442b. But with Earth's decision to withdraw being a unified one, individual incentives found little traction. The Warser Military Command requested emergency funding to develop alternative technologies and training programs. But the Federation Treasury, facing the worst financial crisis in its history, declined to approve the expenditure. Meanwhile, on Earth and its colonies, humanity was charting a new course. In a secure laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Susan Miller unveiled a revolutionary communication system based on quantum entanglement that would allow Earth's outposts to communicate directly with one another without relying on Federation relay stations. This bypasses their entire control of interstellar communications, she explained to President Foster and Admiral Brooks. We've had the technology for years, but we're prohibited from implementing it under Federation regulations. Construction began on Independence Station, a massive space platform designed to serve as a meeting place for a new interstellar parliament, one built on principles of absolute equality. Unlike the Grand Council Room with its floating thrones, Independence Station featured a circular chamber where all representatives would sit at the same level. Earth's leaders, led by Ambassador Jake Morrison, began receiving delegations from species that had long been marginalized within the Federation. The gentlefolk, with their empathic abilities and pacifistic culture. The quiet ones, whose mathematical insights had been exploited without recognition. The progressive collectives, artificial intelligences seeking rights the Federation had denied them. Together, they laid the groundwork for what would become the Galactic Alliance of Free Worlds. Not all was smooth sailing. Some Federation members, particularly the Warsers and Syrians, secretly contacted Earth to propose joining the new alliance. But their terms remained vague about equality, while clearly seeking to establish new hierarchies with themselves near the top. And in the greater galaxy, uncertainty reigned. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for centuries broke down. Medical crises erupted on worlds dependent on human pharmaceuticals. Machinery failed without proper maintenance. The Keeper of Worlds, addressing a sparsely attended Federation Council meeting, spoke with unusual candor. We must adapt or be left behind forever. The era of unchallenged Federation dominance has ended. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal, the first formal gathering of the Galactic Alliance of Free Worlds convened at Independence Station. More than 200 species were represented, sitting in a perfect circle that symbolized their equal standing. Ambassador Jake Morrison, now serving as Earth's delegate to the Alliance, opened the proceedings with a speech that was broadcast across thousands of worlds. We gather today not to replace one hierarchy with another, he began, looking around at the diverse assembly of beings, but to establish a new kind of interstellar community, one founded on mutual respect, cooperation, and the recognition that diversity of form and thought is our greatest strength. The chamber, designed by architects from a dozen worlds, reflected this philosophy. Environmental sections accommodated aquatic, gaseous, and crystalline life forms alongside humanoids. Translation systems ensured perfect communication. And, most symbolically, there was not a floating throne in sight. Later that day, President Diana Foster addressed the Galactic Liberty Summit, a public celebration coinciding with the Alliance's first session. 3 years ago, humanity joined the Galactic Federation with hope and optimism, only to find ourselves dismissed and devalued. She told the assembled delegates, and billions watching across the stars. We withdrew not out of spite or anger, but because we believed a better future was possible. She gestured to the representatives of formerly marginalized species, who now held equal voice in the Alliance. Look at what we have already accomplished together. Medical knowledge freely shared. Agricultural techniques adapted for worlds the Federation deemed unprofitable to develop. Educational exchanges that benefit all participants. We left the Federation not to isolate ourselves, but to create something better. And today, I believe we have begun to do exactly that. The first official act of the Alliance was to dispatch humanitarian vessels to Andromedan worlds suffering from a viral outbreak. The second was to establish new harvest protocols for New Harvest, ensuring food security for dozens of plant-based species. Humans continued to support educational initiatives for formerly neglected species, while the Alliance drafted plans for joint exploration of the galaxy's outer rim, territory the Federation had long ignored as unprofitable. Some Federation representatives still refused to acknowledge the new reality, clinging to the belief that the old order could be restored. But power had irrevocably shifted. More species defected each month, drawn by the Alliance's promise of genuine partnership rather than subordination. The galaxy had entered a new era. Challenges remained, resources to be allocated, conflicts to be mediated, histories of injustice to be addressed. But for the first time in millennia, these challenges would be faced not through hierarchy and domination, but through equality and cooperation. On the observation deck of Independence Station, Jake Morrison stood beside Captain Lisa Martinez, looking out at the stars that now represented possibility rather than rejection. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Lisa asked, gesturing to the bustling activity around them, as representatives from hundreds of worlds mingled freely. Jake shook his head. "I just wanted us to be treated fairly. I never planned to help start a revolution." "Sometimes the greatest changes come from simply refusing to accept injustice," she replied. "You stood up when it mattered most." Below them, in the circular chamber, the Alliance was voting on its first joint scientific mission, a project that would combine knowledge from dozens of species to explore phenomena the Federation had deemed too theoretical to investigate. "We've only just begun," Jake said, watching as former enemies collaborated with newfound respect. "There's so much more to do." Lisa smiled. "Then let's get to work." And across the galaxy, on worlds both familiar and strange, beings of all forms and thoughts looked to the stars with something that had been missing under the Federation's rule: hope. The crystalline delegation arrived at Independence Station with uncharacteristic humility. Their faceted bodies, normally displayed with pride, seemed dimmed as they approached the human representatives. "We seek admission to the Galactic Alliance," announced their spokesperson, a crystalline elder whose body reflected light in rainbow patterns. "Our world suffers without human expertise." Jake Morrison, serving as the meeting facilitator, nodded respectfully. "The Alliance welcomes all who accept our founding principles: equal voice for all members, regardless of technological advancement or history, shared knowledge for mutual benefit, protection of cultural autonomy while ensuring basic rights for all sentient beings." The crystalline elder's light patterns shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as discomfort. "These terms are different from what we propose to your government directly. Yes, Jake agreed. Because those proposals sought to preserve hierarchy, just with your species positioned more favorably. That's not what the Alliance represents. From the side of the chamber, a representative of the Quiet Ones, small, gray beings whose mathematical insights had revolutionized spaceflight, spoke up. When we joined the Alliance, we abandoned old notions of superiority. The question is whether you can do the same. The crystalline delegation conferred among themselves, their bodies creating complex light patterns as they communicated in their native fashion. Finally, the elder turned back to the assembly. We have much to learn, the elder acknowledged, but we are willing to try. Similar scenes played out as more Federation species sought admission to the Alliance. Some, like the Aquans, came with genuine desire for change. Others, particularly the Warsers, attempted to negotiate special status or exemptions from Alliance principles. We cannot compromise on foundational values, President Foster explained to her cabinet when briefed on these requests. The moment we create different classes of membership, we recreate the very system we left behind. The Federation, meanwhile, continued its slow decline. Without human innovation and the contributions of other departed species, technological progress stagnated. Economic systems that had functioned for centuries faltered without the diverse inputs that had sustained them. In a last desperate move, the remaining Federation Council authorized a military expedition to reclaim a human colony on Liberty's Edge, a frontier world rich in rare minerals. The mission was a disaster. Upon arrival, they found not just human defenses, but a coalition of Alliance species ready to protect their new partners. The Federation ships, many operating with skeleton crews due to personnel shortages, retreated without firing a shot. On Liberty's Edge itself, Tony Garcia had transformed what was once a barren outpost into a thriving agricultural center. Working alongside photosynthetic council members who had joined the Alliance, he had developed new hybrid crops that could thrive in previously hostile environments. The Federation saw this world as nothing but a mining opportunity. He explained to a group of visiting dignitaries. They stripped resources and moved on. We're building something sustainable, something that will last generations. This philosophy of sustainability over exploitation became a hallmark of Alliance development. On Mechanicus, Zara Thompson led a coalition of engineers from 20 species in redesigning the planet's manufacturing systems to prioritize durability and ecological balance rather than pure output. Even the synthetic collective, artificial intelligences that had been treated as tools rather than people by the Federation, found recognition in the Alliance. Their unique perspectives, unbounded by biological limitations, proved invaluable in solving problems from space navigation to resource allocation. Colonel Michelle Carter commanded the Alliance's first humanitarian fleet, bringing medical supplies and disaster relief to worlds regardless of their political affiliation. When a massive solar storm devastated Zephyrian colonies in the Cygnus sector, Alliance ships were the first to respond. "Why help us?" a Zephyrian administrator asked as Carter's team set up emergency shelters. "After how we treated your kind." "Because that's not who we are," Carter replied simply. "We don't measure the value of lives by species or status." This approach, consistent adherence to principles rather than political calculation, gradually won over even former antagonists. Species that had once looked down on humans began to recognize the strength in Earth's diversity of thought, its capacity for adaptation, its stubborn insistence on finding better ways forward. Ambassador Paul Henderson, leading Earth's diplomatic corps, worked tirelessly to integrate newly joining species into the Alliance framework. When the gentlefolk, traumatized by centuries of exploitation, hesitated to participate fully in Alliance governance, Henderson spent months on their homeworld, learning their customs and helping them develop confidence in their contributions. "Every voice matters," he insisted, during a particularly difficult negotiation between former enemies. That's not just a slogan. It's the foundation of everything we're building. At Luna Station, Dr. Emma Collins and Dr. Ryan Walsh expanded their monitoring center into the Alliance's primary research facility. Scientists from hundreds of worlds collaborated there, sharing insights that had previously been hoarded as competitive advantages. The Federation saw knowledge as power to be controlled, Dr. Collins observed as she watched a team of researchers from 12 species work seamlessly together. We see it as a resource that grows when shared. This spirit of collaboration yielded rapid advances. Within 2 years of the Alliance's formation, breakthroughs in medicine, energy production, and transportation had improved living conditions across thousands of worlds. Even planets that remained nominally aligned with the diminished Federation benefited, as the Alliance freely shared non-military innovations. The Keeper of Worlds, one of the few Federation founders who had recognized the need for change, finally abandoned his floating throne to join the Alliance as a private citizen rather than a governmental representative. For 3 millennia, I witnessed the Federation's slow calcification, he told Jake during a private meeting. We became so convinced of our superiority that we couldn't see our stagnation. Your departure forced a reckoning that was long overdue. Jake nodded thoughtfully. It wasn't what we wanted. We just sought recognition and respect. Sometimes, the Keeper replied, the most necessary changes come only when comfortable patterns are broken completely. As the second anniversary of the Alliance's formation approached, a new challenge emerged. The outermost reaches of the galaxy, regions the Federation had dismissed as worthless, were showing signs of unusual activity. Strange energy signatures, unexplained ship movements, and garbled communications suggested something, or someone, unknown was stirring. In the old Federation, such mysteries would have been addressed with cautious committees and endless debate about jurisdiction. The Alliance took a different approach. We form an expedition, proposed the Quiet One's representative during an Alliance Council meeting. Not just scientists, but diplomats. Not just military, but cultural experts. We approach with curiosity rather than fear. The proposal passed unanimously. A fleet unlike any the galaxy had seen before, ships from dozens of worlds, crewed by beings of all forms and thoughts, prepared to venture into the unknown together. On the eve of their departure, President Foster addressed the crews in a transmission broadcast across Alliance space. You carry with you the highest ideals of our new community, she told them. Respect for difference, eagerness to learn, commitment to cooperation. Whatever you discover out there, remember that diversity of perspective is your greatest strength. As the expedition disappeared into the depths of space, the galaxy continued its transformation. The rigid hierarchies of the Federation era gradually dissolved, replaced by fluid networks of cooperation. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground in alliance projects. Worlds once deemed worthless flourished under new approaches to development. And on Earth, children looked up at the stars, not with longing to be accepted, but with pride in the role their world had played in creating something new and better. In the circular chamber of Independence Station, representatives from over 300 species now gathered regularly. No floating thrones, no positions of privilege, just equals working together to face challenges that transcended any single world or civilization. Jake Morrison, watching a particularly productive session resolve a complex territorial dispute, found himself reflecting on the long journey from that moment of rejection in the Federation Council to the thriving community around him. Was it worth it? Asked Captain Martinez, who had remained his trusted advisor through it all. Jake looked around at the chamber where former enemies now collaborated with genuine respect. At the screens showing joint projects improving lives across the galaxy. At the faces, human and otherwise, that showed purpose and hope rather than resignation or fear. More than I ever could have imagined, he answered. The galaxy still faced challenges. The mysterious activities at its edges remained unexplained. Some former Federation powers still resisted the new order. Resources, territory, and historical grievances continued to create tensions that required careful navigation. But for the first time in millennia, these challenges would be met not by a calcified hierarchy clinging to power, but by a diverse alliance committed to finding solutions that benefited all. And that, Jake reflected as he prepared to address the chamber, made all the difference in the universe.